And we are live again. So good morning to some of us here. Good afternoon and good evening to anyone watching live now or later. It's my pleasure to be having another conversation again with the people that have produced the amazing show, the Eldritch Episodes Podcast. So I've got with me today Jeff Devine. Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Hello. Very good.
And I've got Victor, who works in the
Hello.
post-production of the show.
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, pleasure is all mine. So the obvious question, whoever wants to take it, what is the Eldritch Episodes?
Well, the Eldritch Episodes started from a desire of mine of, I work with audio post-production for cinema and television, and during my teenage years, I always read Lovecraft and I read other horror authors, and I always had this little itch in my brain that would be very interesting to adapt some of these stories into the format of audio, which is the format that I use, that I work with. And one night, simply, I decided, why not do it? I sat down here on my computer, started drafting a script, made a few posts online. A few people appeared interested. Jeff was one of them. Sent me an email. And we've just been kind of never stopped doing it and grew up. So the idea is to adapt horror stories as an anthology into the format of the audio drama. We try to do immersive soundscapes, original soundtracks, full cast voice actors, all of that to create, I don't want to call it cinematic, because cinematic invokes a sense of image, but this immersive experiences of those horror stories that we read and that we love into another medium.
Yeah, you've touched on a couple of things that I want to talk about, because I have listened to a few of the episodes, but I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. So, I mean, Victor, strangely enough, you're actually probably the first guest that is also Spain-based like me. And Jeff, you are all the way across in the US.
Yes.
So how did that fateful meeting between the two of you happen?
Well, thanks to Reddit. I think it was the H.P. Lovecraft Reddit. Victor made a post talking about audio dramas and looking to recruit people for that. I've always loved Lovecraft, and I've done some voice acting and other acting, so it was just a really good fit. I messaged him, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
Right, because I should be able to do this. Maybe not. Because it seems that with the podcast format, audio dramas are having a bit of a comeback. Is that right?
I would say so, especially I think with content, especially the pandemic. I think it's where we started seeing that boom with people inside their own houses. You know, to record the film, you need to go. Everybody's somewhere. Cameras, crew, the actors. You need to set up some sort of scene, everything like that. And I think podcasts, being audio, being something we can do at home and we can do all across the world. I think with the pandemic, we had this boon of podcasts of different styles. Podcasts of people just talking, podcasts of audio dramas, podcasts as a whole, which is something that is more easy to produce than a full show, series, film, etc. So I think that was a big reason, and it's something that's easier to consume because you get your vision free to do other things. So I assume a lot of people listen to podcasts while they are cleaning the house, driving, doing other things. So I think it was, of course, the pandemic was unfortunate, but something that came out of it was this explosion in this medium.
Yeah, I think for good or for bad, every Dick, Tom, and Harry now has got a podcast. So
some of course with a boom of different of a bunch of people doing it. There's good people and there's bad people. Good shows, bad shows.
Yeah, the one thing that amazes me, and I was just, for anyone that hasn't listened to, check out my episode with Justin Rose, who wrote a whole audio fantasy drama, The Fall of Ingwe. But it's the amount of work that goes behind the scenes, where you've got people all over the world. So we were talking before going live. So what's the team of the Eldritch episodes comprised of? How many people are actively sort of taking part in it, or lending a hand in the whole production?
Well, actively, I could say me and Jeff and our illustrator Hal. We are working on every episode. I sometimes take care of script writing. Sometimes Jeff does that. But then we work on the backstage stuff, emails, getting in touch with people, that sort of stuff. And I take care of the editing of the original soundtracks, of the sound effects, all of that work. And Hal, our illustrator, fantastic guy, always does the art. Those are kind of our fixed team, let's call it that. And then it's a roster of different voice actors that we got in touch with, or that got in touch with us, that sometimes tries for a few of the roles. We send them the script to the lines. They send us back the recording, and then it's hours upon hours of editing. So we have this 3 fixed, and then the rest varies, the actors and everything.
So Jeff, out of curiosity, because you do the voice acting, do you voice different characters within the same episode?
Well, I'm the narrator for the series,
Sorry.
every episode there's almost every episode there's an opening and closing narration, very much like Rod Serling in the Twilight Zone. And then I have voiced the occasional characters in the show. Some of it is we don't necessarily want the narrator's voice to be carried throughout the show, so there are plenty of roles I would have loved to do, but also we don't want it to sound like, oh, there's that guy again doing yet another voice. I have some range on the different types of voices I can do, but the astute listener will be able to pick up, oh, it's the narrator talking now.
Yeah. So you haven't had the opportunity to have a Gollum-like argument for yourself?
Not yet. Maybe in a future episode.
Fantastic.
It's something interesting.
And at the moment, are you just concentrating on the works of H.P. Lovecraft, or are you looking to incorporate other authors in the genre?
It's not strictly Lovecraft. We do love Lovecraft's work. I grew up reading it. Jeff as well is a huge fan. So it was a great place to start, and he has enough works for us to produce podcasts for quite a long time. But it's not necessarily strictly Lovecraft. We would be very open to other authors. A good thing is that Lovecraft's work are in public domain, so we can work with. But we do occasionally write our own originals. We do have ideas for our own originals, and we will have no problem if we find out an interesting author that will be open to either work with us or with the works in the public domain and do an adaptation of their works to our show. It's not fixed at all. We do have that flexibility, although we like Lovecraft quite a lot.
Yeah.
And
sorry.
the Lovecraftian mythos is such a wide playground. Lovecraft himself shared the mythos with his circle of other authors and correspondents, so a lot of other authors would put in nods to Lovecraft, and Lovecraft would put in nods to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I was just thinking that there must be, well, I'm sure there are, but there must be plenty more public domain stories that were published in Weird Tales back in the 30s that you could probably sort of dig up and have a play with. But so my next question, I really enjoyed the episodes that I listened to. We'll talk about it because the Dunwich Horror is my favorite Lovecraft tale, and I'll give you my criticism of that later. But the question is, why did you decide to do another, because just to make it clear to people, this is an adaptation. It's not a narration of the stories. There's plenty of narrations on YouTube and out there. So why did you decide to do an audio drama adaptation rather than a narration of the stories?
It was from the idea of the show from the very beginning of I love audio as a whole. As I mentioned, I worked with it. It's something that I'm really truly passionate about. And I think that Lovecraft is an author that works extremely well in book form, because Lovecraft works with sometimes undescribable things. Your imagination fills the gaps, and that's where part of the horror is. That's why I believe, for example, it's one of the aspects that's so hard to adapt Lovecraft's works to cinema, is that when you try to translate what's visually undescribable to something visually on the screen, you kind of lose part of the magic. So I think the audio is the middle of the way between both. We are able to have a more immersive retelling of that story with sound effects, with music, with all of that. But at the same time, we have still plenty of empty space for the listener to fill the gaps. Of course, we try to tell the same story with the same elements, but that scariness that comes from our fears that we input into what's undescribable, we try to maintain, and that's why I adapt the story to this format, not necessarily just reading, because just reading, like you mentioned, there's plenty of other channels that do that. And of course, adapting to cinema, it has this aspect of being hard. There's the aspect of probably making a Dunwich horror film probably costs colossal amount of money, way more than to make an audio drama. So it's what we could adapt, and what we, with the knowledge and with the equipment we had, and like on that middle of the way between the two.
Yeah, and there are so many great readings of Lovecraft's stories. Channels like Horror Babel or audiobooks like the Wayne June Dark Worlds of H.P. Lovecraft. We can't top that. But with Victor's talent and the talent of the voice actors we've pulled in, we can do something maybe a little bit new, bring something more to some of these stories. A lot of Lovecraft's writing is very complex and very dry. And so we have this opportunity to bring in the 3D audio and a full cast, and to maybe do some little tweaks of stories to explore some things that are to explore more of that playground.
Yeah, your production is fantastic. I really enjoyed what you did. But only issue, but this is for me, and it's not applicable to everyone. I just find funny, I should say this, that the podcast thing, like Victor was saying before, you could listen to it while you're doing the ironing, while you're cooking, sometimes when I go for a run. But I find that sometimes my mind just wanders off. That's why I need to read, either on the Kindle or physically, to really pay attention to the story. If I go for a long run and I've got a podcast in the back of my, just passively listening to it, it's okay if it's people like us having a conversation. But when it's a narration, when it's a story that I have to actively pay attention to, that doesn't work for me. But I don't know where I was going with this. Yeah, so Dunwich Horror, that's it. Dunwich Horror. And Victor, like you said, in my head, I was filling in the mental images, and it was very cinematic. I think it's the closest to a good adaptation of Lovecraft. We can talk about them later, as we were going to get, because I could see in my head when Professor Armitage and so on are meeting in their office, and you have that ability to fill in the absent images in your head. My only criticism is that you gave away the twist of the story far too early, as opposed to in the original tale. I don't know if you'll accept that or not.
there are plenty of it's the challenge of writing an adaptation. When we do the audio drama form, especially on ours, we do have Jeff's narration in the beginning, and we do have some episodes planned, especially the last one that came out, the Horror Red Hook, where we have narrations of actions of what the character is doing or something like that. But it's something that I personally would like to avoid, to let like you said, you, the listener, fill the gaps. We don't need a narrator telling you there's a monster coming if you hear the monster coming. But that comes with a lot of challenges. Mm-hmm. And one of the challenges that it comes, and that it's intrinsic, I believe, to telling stories this way, is that the dialogue needs to be a little bit more, how can I say, descriptive. It's not a realistic dialogue, but you have to give the only way I can give information to the listener is audio cues and what the character is speaking. So that creates those challenges of we may have to change where the twist of the story is, where this information is revealed later on this way. We might have to reveal it before it, so another aspect further on is more understandable, and then we end up having to sacrifice things like that, like twists. Instead of being at the very end, we need to do it in the middle, so you can have and understand by the end what's going on, or to justify a particular scene or a way of telling the story. It's a sacrifice that we have to do on every adaptation. Some parts are lost, or some parts change places.
None of our stories are 100% direct adaptations, and so we are exploring these stories more. Some cases, we're adding new characters, or changing the interactions of characters, or pulling in a character from a different Lovecraft story. Thomas Malone, the protagonist of Red Hook, we put into Dunwich because it was a good fit for that character. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's such a big universe to explore and to play with, that a strict adaptation isn't always the best way to serve the story. And sometimes, a twist gets revealed a little earlier.
Yeah. And so I don't mean to cause any friction here, but Jeff, have you ever got a script from Victor and gone, no, like make suggestions, like change these or change that?
Oh, all the time.
Oh, yeah. We both share the scripts with each other, and we always have comments, and sometimes it's a technical detail. Other times, Victor especially will make comments on how to tweak the scene for audio. Mm-hmm. And he's got such a keen mind for that, okay, well, in Horror at Red Hook, there's a fight scene. And just the way I originally wrote it was good. But Victor pointed out ways to punctuate that fight scene with audio, and to like a conductor with an orchestra. So some of those changes to really bring it to life in audio.
Mm-hmm. And I could say the opposite to Jeff. When I read a script, Jeff is basically a Lovecraft character in human form. Anything that I comment, Jeff already read, or he knows something about it, or he knows something interesting. So I always send my scripts to Jeff, and Jeff comments like, I think this should change, this could work better this other way. And we do have this exchange that at the end of the day, although I get credit as the script writer, or Jeff gets credit as the script writer, it's never truly 100% my script, or it's never truly 100% Jeff's script. There's always, we do this back and forth, which I think is essential, because I have my qualities as a storyteller, and Jeff has his qualities as a storyteller, and they might overlap or not. There might be things that I'm better at than Jeff is, and there might be things that Jeff is better than I am. So having this exchange of various versions of script, various emails exchange, look, I think this should work because of X, Y, and Z, or I think this other thing doesn't work this way. For production wise, like Jeff said, so for audio, it would be better if we did this way, or something story wise, like I don't think this works quite well with this other scene forward, or I think this scene, if you tweak this a little bit, it should work better. Dunwich, a great example. We did, I think, was 3 script versions of Dunwich.
At least
It was the first one that was very like compact, and we didn't like it. There's the second one that got better, and then the third one is the one that got produced and then is up. That's an important part of the process, this back and forth of not liking each other's scripts.
and you know, when you're writing a script, you're by yourself, everything is in your head, and it's easy to, well, I know that, so the audience should know that, and just to be able to point out little things and to have some outside perspective, so it's not just in your head. I
do have to say something. It's to thank another one of our voice actors that appears sometimes, which is Aaron. He's a history professor, and he also does some checkings on the scripts for historical accuracy. So, for example, our episodes from What Comes from the Deep, which is set in the Caribbean in the 1750s, give or take. I really enjoy history things, but I'm not a professor. So Aaron sometimes also goes and do a little polishing of a term that wasn't exactly used, or this rank. For example, there's a character of Eloise, which is a nurse, originally was a nun. And he said that wouldn't work historically 100% in that context, in that situation. So we tweaked the characters. So we're always open to having feedback on our scripts, having feedback on the work we do. And that tends to lead to better results.
Is that, I mean, that's a great example of the level of detail that you guys get to. But it must be a writer thing. Like when I've perpetrated some novels and short stories in the past, I've always been mindful of, what if someone that really knows about this reads this? Like, you don't want to get caught out, isn't it? Like 99% of the people wouldn't know that difference between the nun and the nurse, would they?
Yeah. It's we want to tell a story that is believable, and this is something that I have like a little, let's say, a little problem with some historical adaptations. For example, Napoleon, the movie that came out recently. There's so much rich content on actual history that happened that you could tell a very interesting story. It's that balance between what to adapt and to create, and what is, like, if I can think about this, and if this it's a minor change in the script that would make it more believable, even for those people that like only 1% of the audience would ever know. But if we can't do that, why not do it? You know, and Aaron came to us completely by accident. He's the voice of Wilbur, for example, on the Dunwich Horror. He came to us as a voice actor. And then he revealed to us that I actually work as a history professor. I can check out the script. And we're like, yeah, please do.
Yeah.
And so taking care of the details help to a more immersive story to be told.
Jeff, are there any particular stories that you will like, any particular roles in any particular Lovecraft stories that you would like to take an active part rather than being the narrator?
Boy, that's a tough one. You know, there's so many interesting characters in Lovecraft stories, and well, one, I kind of grew up in Lovecraft country. I grew up right outside of Boston, so the New England accent is native to me. So many of these characters, I think of Shadow over Innsmouth, and some of those characters, and you know, the New England accent, that's my family. My mother grew up on Cape Cod, so when Lovecraft writes those New England dialogue lines, all of that is internal to me. So I feel some of that I can do justice to,
Right.
but I also understand the not wanting to overuse my voice for stories, to keep the narrator as its own thing. And we have some thoughts about who the narrator really is and what the narrator really is that maybe get revealed somewhere down the line.
Right. Okay. And in your opinion, because I think there's some pretty tough ones out there, like what's Lovecraft stories do you think will present the biggest challenge to adapt? Or if there are any that are unadaptable, which I've got a couple of suggestions, but go ahead.
Yeah. I love Lovecraft's more surreal stories. The Evil Clergyman. That is such a weird story because it's essentially just Lovecraft's dream that he wrote to a friend that later got published as a story. And it doesn't have a solid narrative structure to it. So something like that, I would love to find a way to destroy it or to be able to develop it. Nyarlathotep, another Lovecraft story that was one of his dreams, where the ending just sort of peters off into the void. That's a script I've started. I have not found the way to end that one.
Yeah. And Victor, which stories do you think would be more challenging?
It's interesting because I think not necessarily on the narrative structure of it, but the sound structure of it. There are some particular stories that will be very hard. For example, one that I think will be incredibly challenging and will require a lot of adaptations is Call of Cthulhu, especially by the structure of various characters with various situations. So following one character throughout everything might be a bit challenging, or even the way that Lovecraft writes them. So stories like that we had to do like some crazy creative work was one that we actually adapted, Beyond the Walls of Sleep, which there's a part where the doctor goes into this Lovecraftian abyss of colors and other things, and how am I going to tell that through audio? And I think Lovecraft has various of those. The color out of space, for example. How am I going to describe that weird color with sound? And I think that those stories are the particularly challenging ones. When Lovecraft leans on the visual aspect of the undescribable to tell the horror is the one where I think it's challenging.
Yeah, I can see that. I was going to throw out there, and you give me your opinion, that the whole the whole dream saga of Randolph Carter.
An excellent example.
The last time I was like, I'm going to reread the Randolph Carter series. I had to stop after 5 pages. It was bad. Like I've read them once as a teenager, or maybe I've read it in Spanish first, then read it in English, and I tried to go back to it a few months ago. It was dry.
Yeah, Lovecraft is not always an easy read.
No.
I feel a lot of that with Lord of the Rings as well. I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. And there's some parts of Lord of the Rings where like you really need to be motivated to get through it.
Yeah,
I think Lovecraft also has its moments like that.
I won't hear anything bad said about Lord of the Rings in this.
No, don't worry. I got my first tattoo, and it was a Lord of the Rings tattoo when I was 14, and because of my love of it, I work with soundtracks today because of the soundtrack of Lord of the Rings. I share that passion through it.
And
we won't say anything about the Lord of the Rings, but Similaron.
No, well, hey.
Yeah, excellent example. Like sometimes you're like, I understood that this guy is the grandson of that guy and that other guy, and the reading, the act of reading, might start to being a bit challenging.
Yeah.
But it's excellent when you finish it and you remind of the history that it's.
Yeah. Well, the beginning of the Silmarillion is all music, so there you go. Feel free to.
Yes. But when they start talking about when they mention a new character, and then Tolkien has to write the entire family tree of that character, so you to understand why that character is important. Sometimes you do have that feeling of, okay, I got it, or like you're trying to describe too much, like to gain too little out of it story wise. And Lovecraft is guilty of doing that a lot of times, of having that flavor of the text, of using the fancy words and trying to describe. It's part of his work, but sometimes you're like, maybe to enjoy the reading of this, I need to ground myself a little bit more.
Yeah, and because with I had, I don't know if I'll retake it, but I had a Call of Cthulhu role-playing game group, and we were doing, I've got another channel in Spanish, and we were doing discussions of different Lovecraft stories. And then we went back to mountains, thinking, the greatness of mountains. And in this last read, me and a mate were like, this was actually pretty dull. I suspect it starts really well, and you can see, John Carpenter's The Thing, the influence there. But I will probably cut off all that middle section when they go in the caves. That's just incredibly dull and self-important. I think disappears up its own backside, sort of thing. What's your take on mountains?
I do have an opinion on it, and I would like to hear what Jeff has to talk about it later. I do think Lovecraft had excellent ideas, and he created concepts in a world that is extremely interesting. And I think that's where his strong part is not going to say world building, because not necessarily all the stories are connected, but the themes that he brings and that he helped popularize. I think that's where Lovecraft is strong. I'm not such an avid reader as Jeff. I'll confess myself. I read not nearly as many books as him, probably. So I do completely understand that feeling you have of, it's a bit tiring, like this could be done a bit better. But I do think that if you stop and you rethink the whole story, after you finish it, it's a really interesting story, and deal with some really interesting concepts, especially of the fear of the unknown, the settings that they create. Like it's rich enough to fuel your imaginations, and for us to tell stories now, almost a century after many of the stories were written, we're still talking about it because the ideas were interesting, not necessarily the execution. Let's say it like that. At least from my side, who doesn't have that habit of reading every day, for example, that I imagine that either Jeff, not necessarily every day, but Jeff, from our conversations, seems like the type of person that reads way more than I do.
A lot of audiobooks these days. I think at the Mountains of Madness, it's part of that context, because Lovecraft was writing about stuff that he was reading about that was happening. It was that age of exploration. The Antarctica was this unknown frontier, and so there still was this exploration happening. And Lovecraft kind of gets bogged down in details about Parvati's drilling machine and things along those lines. But that was the news of the day, those levels of detail. And so a lot of, especially the first part of it, is really that here is the correspondence that and the stories that are being printed in the newspaper and you're hearing on the radio. And so I think it adds so much flavor to it and authenticity.
I don't have any issues with that bit. I don't even have issues with the penguins. But it's that whole section when they go in the caves, and then we get this whole backstory of the world and the fight between the Shoggoth and the Elder Ones, and it's like, oh god, like that drags on for a bit.
And it's a scene I've thought a lot about adapting. Is that in Lovecraft's story, they're looking at a mural and suddenly pulling out this huge history from a mural with alien language. That's a bit of a stretch, and I think maybe that could have used a couple more revisions before it should have been
Yeah,
published.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But
Pacing,
having
I
that
think, is a big
context
issue.
and telling that bigger, millions of years of history, I think there's better ways of doing it. But I love that cosmic scale of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times the issue is more the pacing of the act of reading than what's actually being told, And I think, like, if we adapt it, we do plan to adapt it, although these stories, it is something we're definitely going to spend some time thinking about it, how to implement. And it's that thing of changing the you mentioned on Dunwich, that we change the twists, the order of things. We might have to tell the same information, but maybe scatter out in other aspects. Not necessarily we stopped at this mirror and going to tell you the entire story now. Maybe a flavor in the beginning of the story, maybe a little more information here. Then there's the scene of the mirror where we give a very good amount of the story, but not as many for the pacing of everything. This is part of the challenging of adapting as well. I think no storyteller is perfect, and Lovecraft had his flaws, various flaws of him as a human person, and the flaws of him as a writer. And I think sometimes the pacing of Lovecraft might be a bit dull, like you said, and it's hard challenging when adapting it, making that interesting.
Yeah, and you mentioned one that I've always really enjoyed from the reading perspective, which is the Call of Cthulhu, because it's got those layers that you're peeling the onion. Someone that inherits these letters or this story that were investigating a sudden cult, which themselves were investigating, which then leads to the story of the Norwegian sailor and stuff like that. But it works on so many levels, because you, as the reader, at the first skin of that onion, you are reading about someone who is reading about someone who is reading. And I think that would be another challenge for you in that adaptation, because you lose that extra layer that when you finish the story, it's like, oh, I've just read what all these people have read that led them to the madness or the cults or whatever.
I think that will be a very challenging one for that reason. And it might be one of the stories where we do have to add either a narrator or a central line, a spine of the story that connects all of those readings to something, and then adapt the individual scenes, that sort of thing. For example, one thing that we have to do quite a lot is to fill in the gaps. And if it's someone reading something that someone else read and so on in that chain, a lot will be lost. So it's a story that, to make it totally accurate to the original, I think will be extremely challenging.
Yeah.
But I do think there is a way, with enough adaptations and enough filling of gaps, that something interesting can come out. Because it's a classical story. Let's be honest. It's one of the most famous one. We kind of do have this responsibility of adapting eventually. Together with Mountains of Madness, together with Innsmouth, Dunwich Horror was definitely on the list. As soon as me and Jeff started talking months ago, it's like we made like, this is one we want to adapt. How we're going to do it, no idea. But we do want to. We do have that like, there are interesting stories, but there are at the same time challenges, and those challenges, it's something you have to go over and over and over again, polish.
Yeah, those challenges are fun.
Yes.
They're a little.
Oh, I think Jeff froze.
Can we find? Our most recent episode, the horror at Red Hook, is one I adapted, and in a lot of ways, it's one of Lovecraft's worst stories. Not just for the racism, but the whole third act of it. It's very loose. There's no explanation as to why these events happen, and so just that challenge of there's a good core here. How can we pull out these details? How can we come up with a structure that's going to be entertaining as an audio drama and tie together and flow smoothly. For Red Hook, since it was Lovecraft's detective story, we adapted it as the classic noir detective story. So Thomas Malone is front and center and doing the noir narration, and it fit really, really well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Everyone loves a tall tale, isn't it? Something like Shawshank Redemption wouldn't have been the same without that voiceover from Morgan Freeman.
Mhm.
Very stupid question that I've got before we move on to something else. But when you are recording dialogue, have you got two people talking to each other in the same room, or are you just getting it's all different files, people in different countries?
It's all starts with a PDF that we send to the actors, and we have the script with the name of the character and the line, and they do recordings, sometimes 2-3 takes of each line, and it's up to editing, placing them together sound wise on the same environment, and that's what creates that feel of they are talking to each other. But originally, no, each actor records individually on their own home studios or whatever setup they have, and sent to me an audio file with the lines, and I open the script on my screen, I open the editing software on the screen, and I have to do a few hours of looking at the script, looking at the lines, matching everything. And it's fun. It's challenging. It's a lot of work, but it's fun. But totally separate.
I was going to say it's going to be a labor of love.
Mm-hmm.
And then, are you at some point, because like I said, I really enjoyed it. It was very cinematic. Or would you consider at some point doing some sort of crowdfunding thing to take one of these scripts and do a full-on film adaptation, or is that pie in the sky because of the challenges we've talked about before?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the dream?
I don't know about film, but we have discussed it a couple times yet. We're just waiting for the show to get a little some traction and have some stable views and a good number of subscribers to make bigger stories, because we currently adapt one story per episode or every 2 episodes with part 1, part 2, which by the nature of Lovecraft's work fits quite well, because he wrote for pulp magazines. The stories were usually shorter, but we lose some storytelling, let's say, some storytelling aspects by just telling short stories. And we do like to tell full stories with full, like a full season, for example, to tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
And we have commented on that, and we will technically try to do this through some crowdfunding. I'll give an example that we commented. We don't know if it's going to come to reality now, but to make a cosmic horror adaptation of Moby Dick, I saw a comment somewhere online that just threw this idea, and I was like, "There's a story there. You can definitely tell that story." But that should be a big story. It's a big book with different aspects, a number of things happening. That's way bigger than if we grab The Hound, for example, which is 3 pages long. And we would like to do this maybe with some crowdfunding to get maybe more people involved, have some more structure, because all we do, it's 100% guerrilla style. We send the PDFs to the actors, we get them back, we have to go after one actor or another, we do everything ourselves by a labor of love, like you said. And having more resources will let us tell more complex and more interesting stories.
Yeah, I think it would be fun to have a story with more visuals in it, not necessarily a full cinematic, but more of an animatic where,
Mm-hmm.
You have an illustration for each scene that might zoom in on certain aspects or things like that. And when I think about adapting something like The Evil Clergyman, so far the only thing I found would be something that was very visual.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that. And then talking about the cinematic adaptations of Lovecraft, I think we can all agree they've all been pretty abysmal. But what are your takes on that? Have you seen the is it the Robert Gordon ones from the 80s?
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, they were dreadful.
Yeah. There's a certain charm to them, although they're not Lovecraft. But I love Re-Animator, or that series, and Bride at the Re-Animator. They're just off the wall and low budget. Um, but it is what it is, and 80s splatter movie,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah,
they're fun.
but I just wish they had taken it seriously,
Mm-hmm.
because they could have done a. Just don't have to go into the whole comedy thing. Take it
Yeah,
seriously. I think it could have worked.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I would have, you know, loved to have seen some really good adaptation or film adaptations of Lovecraft, and I don't think we've ever quite got there. There's some, I don't think we've ever had a lot of budget thrown at a Lovecraft movie, or really truly talented directors able to do that. Guillermo Del Toro uh, has tried forever to adapt At the Mountains of Madness, and the budget for a project like that, I think, is always what's killed it. That in order to make it happen, you need Tom Cruise to be a star, and
Yeah,
things like that. Just for a film of that budget.
but
Mm-hmm.
well, I think it's probably the worst place to start in terms of an
Mm-hmm.
adaptation. But we had a half decent one, which was the Spanish-American co-production Dagon,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically Shadow over Innsmouth, but it gets relocated to the north of Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually got a half decent production value, and it's got some very good Spanish actors to do
Mm-hmm.
the locals. But beyond that, I didn't enjoy, because I think Guillermo del Toro had a series on Netflix where he adapted some stories,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and again, I didn't quite enjoy them either. There was something missing for
Yeah.
me.
Some definitely missed the mark. Um, I would have loved to have seen a director like David Lynch, adapt a Lovecraft story. His atmosphere was always, do it like the Elephant Man in black and white and period, and build up the creepiness more than the special effects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think one film that's not a Lovecraft adaptation, but hit the mark was The Lighthouse from Robert Eggers.
Mhm.
It has the
Yeah.
dreadful, like the thematic, and although there is not the creatures or the monsters, but the thematic and the sense of you as the viewer going insane together with those two men. I think it has a lot of Lovecraft on it, and I think something on that direction could be very, very interesting. But
Yeah.
although I agree, there's not many actual Lovecraft adaptations. I had fun watching Color Out of Space. I know it's not like a super faithful adaptation, let's call that, but like as a horror movie that like you watched on, I watched with my girlfriend after dinner, watching. Oh, let's watch this. It's based on that story that I like. It was cool. It was interesting, but I agree. There's no movie that truly hits that mark, and you're like, that film is excellent.
Yeah, some have definitely captured elements of Lovecraft stories. The Color Out of Space was an interesting movie, and there were some elements of it that were spot on, and then other stuff is just way out there. Even the earlier adaptations of Color Out of Space, Die Monster Die, back in the 1960s, and The Curse with Will Wheaton. Each of those stories, there's like that little kernel of, that's what the whole movie should have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. It's complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated. But I think you could have taken someone could take the John Carpenter route. The Thing is pure Lovecraft.
Yes.
It's just he could have written it basically, maybe with a couple of tweaks here and there, but it certainly is. So I don't know. Just do that. One more thing. I'm want to pick your brains because my next video for the channel, and I've been trying to put my thoughts in order, but I don't seem to be able to do it. And I actually asked Lovecraft's biographer, David Goodwin, episode 51, I think it was, of the podcast, about the ephemeral nature of the short horror story. Horror story anthologies are, a dime a dozen, right? Every year, there are so many horror story anthologies published. But they don't have any staying power. You read them, and after a while, you've forgotten them. I've read all the classics, the Emma James ghost stories, Algernon Blackwood, even Allan Poe. For someone that has read them all, maybe there's only one or two that actually sort of stick in your mind and have that power to remain and make you a little bit uncomfortable. However, with Lovecraft, I think, it's more often than not that staying power is there. That they really do, I don't know what it is, that they hit something that people remember and it stays with people. And that's why, over 100 years after, we're still talking about him and talking about his influence. So what do you think it is about Lovecraft's work that have made him relevant and made him stay relevant when there are so many horror writers that you can just read and forget about very quickly? Unless I'm wrong about my perception of the short horror story.
I think you're 100% right, and I don't know what Jeff's opinion is, but I think Lovecraft has the benefit of being the first. And I think of that a lot with music. We recently had the passing of Ozzy Osbourne, and I'm a huge metalhead. And I look back at Black Sabbath, for example. There is a world before Black Sabbath and after Black Sabbath in music, in heavy metal music, for example. And there is a world in terms of horror before Lovecraft and after Lovecraft. The horror before Lovecraft, it was very the demon, the vampire, the werewolf. Lovecraft brings, like Jeff mentioned, it was the news of the time. He brings his time with it. So he brings science, although not necessarily correct science, but he brings scientific themes of the space, of other dimensions, of the horror is not on the devil that's going to tempt you with sin. The horror is going to be in a weird mathematical angle that we don't understand. And of course, we have authors a bit before him that did something, had elements of this starting to appear. But I think he was the first big one. Like, not in life, because he did not have success in life, but after he passed away with his friends and the other authors that started grabbing his ideas and putting into their own stories. And when people started to ask, oh, where did they come from? They come from Lovecraft. So he, in my opinion, has this importance for being one of the first to popularize a new type of horror and a unique type of horror that it's very his, let's call it like that, and that influences tons of people in front. I don't think there will be a Lovecraft as famous as he is today without Guillermo Del Toro mentioning that he used Lovecraft as one of his inspirations, or Stephen King, or other authors. I think he, because the big works because if you think about it, Lovecraft himself is, in his ideas, are more popular than his stories. Like, we know Cthulhu because of Call of Cthulhu, because got famous, and we know the stuff. And now this is on pop culture now because people play the tabletop RPGs where a colossal amount of people got in touch with. Very rarely people get in touch with Lovecraft from Lovecraft's original work. People usually got in touch with something else, get inspired, and then go read the Lovecraft's original work. And I think he has this weight of inspiring others that's what make him sticks more than just a random anthology of horror. So at least is my opinion from what I've seen.
Yeah, I obviously Lovecraft was hugely influential. And even in his own time, he wasn't a household name, but he had his circle. He had those thousands of correspondences. And he inspired so many other authors that he was writing to. You know, Robert Bloch was a kid who wrote to Lovecraft, and Lovecraft responded and encouraged and dedicated The Haunter in the Dark to him, which was an unofficial sequel to a Robert Bloch story. And so there's that ripple effect of Lovecraft, which I think it's going to keep his name known, but his stories themselves, they really do stick with you. And part of it is the archaic writing, the hyperverbosity of obscure words and obscure spellings.
Yeah.
All those little things, I think they help cement them into your brain. His writing has a viral quality. It sticks, it resonates. Some of it is that cosmic horror of, here is something that it isn't the werewolf or the devil. It's something that's indifferent. You know, it's just there, and you're an ant.
Yeah.
And it is so much greater and bigger, and that scale of cosmic horror is, yeah, humans are great and powerful. We're colonizing the world, but that is just a speck of dust compared to, you know, the grand scope of time. That whole history of, well, yeah, man is the dominant life form now, but wasn't always and won't always be. That, you know, here is this little blip in the history and the blip in the cosmos. And I think that greater existential horror really helps it stick.
Yeah.
And even his lesser stories, The Terrible Old Man, that's essentially just a serial killer.
It's a great story. That is a great story. That is a great story. Is it 3, 4, 5 pages? It's no more than that.
It's very short, yeah. The first mention of Arkham. And just, you know, a little detail of the spot of blood appearing on the ceiling and starting to pool and drip and dripping on the page of the book the character is reading. That is just such a visceral element. You know, it's not the cosmic horror, but boom, there's that splash of color on the old page. And looking up to see the spreading stain. That is just so chilling. Stephen King, tries to hit those notes.
Yeah, I mean, followers of my channel and the podcast know I'm not the greatest Stephen King fan. I've read quite a few of his books because they were easy to pick up. You know, when you're on the train station or the airport and you got a long trip ahead, that's when I would pick them up. They're easy reads, but
omnipresent.
Yeah, but other than, whereas actually, well, I keep saying this, I understood Stephen King better when I read his short stories. That anthology, Skeleton Crew, there's a couple of them that really stick with you, and I understood it then. But no one is going to convince me that The Stand is a horror story, or It, or any of those long books. But anyway, just a couple of questions to finish off. What was your, because Victor mentioned, Jeff, what was your rabbit hole into Lovecraft? How did you fall down there? What was your first point of contact?
So first point of contact, I was probably 3 or 4 years old, and I have an older brother who got some Lovecraft books somewhere. And I remember seeing them in his bookcase. And these were the Bantam editions with covers by an artist named John Holmes. Not that John Holmes. But just this wonderful, surreal, nightmarish face. Like it was rats in the walls. And just that cover stuck with me. What is this horrible thing? And as a kid, it frightened me, but I also loved it. And it was, I think I asked my mother about about it and like, oh, that's Lovecraft. She was a big reader, but I think Lovecraft was too dark for her. And so that even his name stuck with me. And so, probably in my early teens, I, bought a Lovecraft anthology and, started diving into, this very dense story writing and a lot of archaic, complex words. And I'm very dyslexic. And at that time, I was really struggling to read. And so it was a real challenge to me to force myself into these wonderfully creepy stories. And because a lot of them are short, it's an easy conquest to a, dyslexic kid who's struggling to get through a story that like, okay, it was Terrible Old Man, only a few pages long, and I got the whole story.
Absolutely. And you, Victor?
Mine was a bit different, but also related to books. Actually, it started with a podcast. I don't remember the name, but it was in Brazilian Portuguese. For the listeners, I am originally Brazilian. And I was in my early teens as well. Starting to get into, well, I am way younger than Jeff. So when I was in my early teens, there was already a YouTube. There was already beginning of social media and all of that.
Jesus. Yeah, that's insultingly young. Sorry.
I'm 23, so yeah. So it's probably like what 10 to 12 years ago that the story takes place. And I don't remember if it was a podcast, if it was a YouTube video, or something talking about Lovecraft. And talking about Lovecraft as a whole, in general, either commenting on the story or something like that. And I remember walking on the shopping center that was near my house. And there was this big like bookstore there. And I got in and I was looking at the books, see if there was anything interesting. I was like 14, 15. And then I saw it on one of the shelves, H.P. Lovecraft. I was like, from that video I've watched. And then I grabbed one book, I bought it, and I started reading. And I fell in love.
I like that turn of phrase. And then I saw it. Like we all knew exactly what you meant.
And I saw it. If I remember the cover well, it was an armchair with a little lamp and like illuminating a room, and on the very corner, a single tip of a tentacle.
A single what?
The tip of a tentacle coming out of the
okay.
box. Single one. It's like, what is this? Let me grab it. First from that video that I watched, and then I grab it, and that was it. From there. Fast forward, but 10 years later, I'm here.
Fantastic. So it's about almost, usually I do these things for an hour or so. So I would like to thank you both for being here, for reaching out. I've really enjoyed the conversation. But before we go, quick question. So Jeff, favorite and least favorite Lovecraft story?
Oh boy. I think Case of Charles Dexter Ward is my favorite. For least favorite, that's pretty tough. I'm not sure I could necessarily name one as a least favorite.
Ooh.
I mean, in a lot of ways, Horror at Red Hook, I think, was one of my least favorite. And I just adapted that for the Eldritch episodes. So it's mining that story, I was finding gold.
Even below Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath or Celephites or all those really weird, eerie ones?
I like the weirdness.
Really?
Some of those, they don't resonate with me as much as some of it is horror ones. Is Dream Cycle doesn't quite do it for me as much, but I still appreciate them, and I still kind of appreciate the way a lot of those stories tie into other ones, like Hardly Warren showing up in the Dreamland, and finding the cats of Ulthur there as well.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And Victor, favorite and least favorite?
Favorite. I think the one that I could list various here, but I think the one that I remember was the first one that caught me on that very same book that I just mentioned was Whisper in Darkness. That's the translation of the title in English. I just felt that like I don't know why it hooked me up having that mystery of the two guys sending message to each other and when something's happening and you don't know what's going on. That was the first time in regards to Lovecraft, that I was on the edge of my seat. Let's say while I was reading, I was like, "What's going to happen? Like, what's going on? Like, I want to know more." But at the same time, you have that fear of knowing more, because when you read Lovecraft, knowing stuff, it's not necessarily a good thing.
It's not good for you.
And you have it gives some type of anguish on here. Like when you read, it's like, I want to, but should I know what's going on? And that feeling I started having first Whisper in Darkness, but then I can mention Beyond the Wall of Sleep is one that also hooked me up in the beginning. And if we go to things such as the famous one, Mountains of Madness, I think is fantastic. One that I really liked because it touched on my history side, and spoiler alert, is one that we are talking about adapting, is The Very Old Folk, which is a Lovecraft letter, but then it's the first time I read a Lovecraft story that went away from that 1920s Lovecraft country things, and it kind of opened the scope, so I could mention that one as well. And least favorite, I think, is The Street, which doesn't have much connection to like the mythos as a whole, and it was on that anthology, and I felt a bit disconnected. So it's the first one that I remember in my head. It's like,
I can't even recall that one. So there you go. I may have to give it a reread tonight.
I can tell you the story like as a general thing. I don't remember even the details. I just remember having that experience of being very hooked in Whisper in Darkness, and that hook going away in the street.
Right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure talking all things Lovecraft with anyone willing. So I really appreciate your time and what you're doing. But before we go, could you direct people at where can they find your work, what you do, and what you're up to?
Yes, they can. You can search on the major streaming platforms or on YouTube for the Eldritch Episodes. You are going to see the yellow color pop up because it's something for our brand and stuff. But we also have a website that we just built called the eldritchepisodes.com. You can also look for that. And if you enjoy audio dramas, if you enjoy adaptations, if you enjoy cosmic horror, I hope you enjoy our show as well.
Yeah. We are just working on finishing up Horror at Red Hook Part 2. We've got The Very Old Folk lined up as the next episode, and then limitless possibilities as to what's going to come after that.
Fantastic. Well, like I said, thank you very much for being here. There's been a few people lurking in the background there, but not quite popping in on the chat. So you lurkers are always appreciated. Anyone listening later to the podcast, so it's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Take lots of care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.